Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio's online lunchtime talk. These are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out onto your smartphones, laptops, iPads and living room televisions. My name is Martin O'Leary and I'm the Pervasive Media Studio's creative technologist. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from the people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. An especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio, for whom this may be the first time you're engaging with us. For all of you newcomers, here's a little bit about what we do. The Pervasive Media Studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding, product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, the University of the West of England and the University of Bristol. We're a home for early ideas, companies and a meeting place of both the creative and commercial industries. And we're a studio space, offering desk space, meeting rooms, events and opportunities all for free for our residents. And we're a safe space for artists to take risks in their practice and to make time for collaboration. This week's talk is called Digital Placemaking Platforms and the Circular Economy, and it's by Reid, the Managing Director of founding studio residence Calvium. She'll be talking about the dream of turning the world into a virtual stage on which anyone can play their part, and how production costs still prevent that from becoming ubiquitous. There'll be a Q&A at the end, and the talk runs at around about 35 minutes. If you want to ask any questions, just pop them into the chat window and I'll pick them out to ask Joe. Or if you like, you can tweet your questions to us at PM Studio UK. There'll be a captioned version of this talk available here after the talk is finished. Now before we start, next week's talk is by Rob Eagle and it's called Making Through Failing. Rob is an interdisciplinary artist and a PhD researcher at Bristol's Digital Cultures Research Centre. He'll be talking about how failure can open up opportunities for us to live non-normative lifestyles and to create work that is true to who we are and how we see the world. You can get news on all of our future talks by following us on @PM Studio UK on Twitter, @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share this link now on any of your socials. It'll be live and recorded for all time. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Joe.
Thanks very much, Martin. It was a very nice spiel, and it's lovely to kind of be back in the studio, albeit virtually. And thank you for everyone for taking some time to kind of listen into this talk. Yet another thing on the computer screen, but thank you for taking time out to do it. So in this talk, I'm going to be reflecting on a kind of personal history that I've had with creating digital placemaking platforms. I'm going to introduce, as I understand it, the main concepts of the circular economy and consider what the digital placemaking platform could gain from the principles of the circular economy. And if we've got time for talking at the end, I'd invite you to consider whether a vision that I'll paint for outlining how it might work for the city of Bristol could work, or is it just a pipe dream? But first of all, I'd like to quickly introduce Calvium. So Calvium are a leading creative technology agency. We combine expertise in experience design, software engineering, and mobile innovation. And we've got a broad range of clients. We essentially kind of have historically, and because, as Martin said, our roots in the Pervasive Media Studio and working with artists, we have worked a lot in the cultural sector and now more in the aerospace sector and other commercial sectors. So we can develop kind of customer-facing mobile apps for the likes of Yodel, where in particular location and tracking is an essential part of their interface, as I'll show in the kind of following little clip. The other kind of work that we have done a lot of is collaborations with various universities. One such that we've worked on for a long time is a long-standing collaboration with the University of Exeter. And with them, for example, we've created the Hidden Florence AR app, which recently won one of the best use of AR in the UK App Awards. Little clip again of that wider project, Hidden Florence, and a little snapshot of the kind of the experience in the augmented reality app that we developed. with them. So this is kind of part of the Hidden France Trail Making, and this is an experience that you can do in the National Gallery in Florence or at home, available on the app stores if you'd like to give it a go. And the final kind of example of the sort of work that we do is illustrated by kind of working on research with our background in research and development. Certainly still like to kind of, where possible, think about doing that. And a recent project we did with Innovate UK funding was around NAVSTA, where we worked with neurodiverse participants to verify that the kind of wayfinding app that we were trying to develop, called NAVSTA, worked for them when navigating through, for them, terrifyingly large and complex train station. Again, following clip kind of shows us in action of doing this kind of inclusive design research development, and the resulting snapshot there of the app that we actually successfully trialed in the stations. So that's a little bit of kind of about some of the things that Calvium have been up to and that we enjoy doing, the company that I'm very proud to lead. And I want to now kind of speak a bit about my personal journey, in particular related to digital placemaking platforms. So it kind of goes back, and thanks to Sal, our lovely designer in Calvium, who kind of took, I said to her, well, I've kind of gone through and dug out these really old slides. So can you kind of give them that retro feel and stick them in for context? So here's some kind of reuse of old slides that I've pulled out. But it's quite kind of interesting to reflect back, and actually where it started was back in 2001 when I and the other founding members of Calvium actually were all at Hewlett-Packard Research Laboratories. And we were interested there, very much kind of inspired by the Pine and Gilmore's Experience Economy book, to see how emerging technologies might be used to create experiences rather than just focus on utilities. And so then we started to kind of think about what it would be like to start collaborating with artists and people from the creative sector, and would we be able to kind of create tools and mechanisms that could use these emerging things to be able to do things that actually reacted to where you were in place and space. And so back then we kind of created the first authoring toolkit, which we were calling 4D Experience. And actually, again, another kind of a founder person, I remember from the Pervasive Media Studio, Liz Milner, we commissioned her to kind of put some of her beautiful pictures that she'd taken as a separate commission around Lee Woods. We put them in the atrium and rigged up kind of ultrasonic positioning system so that we could track where people were as they walked around and see how they reacted to sound, space and movement. And then that kind of led on and grew as a thing. And during that time as well, we were kind of, that model was, I think, underpinned the kind of DNA of what became the Pervasive Media Studio. So kind of these collaborations between companies, technologies and artists. And then we ended up having, again, a funded large-scale project called Mobile Bristol, where we worked with, as HP, we worked with the University of Bristol and Watershed to create a citywide testbed for exploring new kinds of experience, and again, creating tools and processes for artists to create new forms of experience. And the results of that was a kind of, again, our first platform that we created whilst at HP, which was called Mscape. At that time, Apple had just kind of started to launch their iPhone and the App Store. So all of the trials up to that point, we were kind of shoehorning together with HPI packs and attaching GPS trackers and all these kind of cumbersome things. And so again, it was kind of, well, actually, suddenly the world's changed. Now the mobile phone is here with all these wonderful potential technologies becoming everyday things. Could this vision become alive? Sadly, in 2009, that was kind of the last recession start, and our lab was closed down. And so we kind of took that opportunity then to form Calvium. And again, fabulously, we were hosted by the Pervasive Media Studio as founding residents. And during that time kind of took the know-how of how we'd worked together on Mobile Bristol, and recognized that as we were no longer in HP, we could kind of take advantage of the fact that mobile was just emerging, iPhones were obviously rocketing. And so we kind of developed this first Calvium platform called App Furnace. It was that kind of, well, nowadays, I guess it would be kind of, a good example of a kind of low code, easy app generating toolkit. But again, with that kind of mission that we had all those years ago to try to make it really easy for creative people to kind of, who had these visions and ideas, to be able to kind of easily drag and drop and create particular things that utilized all of these wider technologies. I suppose a lot of them are always kind of place-based and primarily kind of location aware was where its forte really came in. So we've done obviously several iterations of having a go of these platforms, and App Furnace was Calvium's kind of first launch, if you like, of a platform where we wanted to make a commercial success of it with that original vision. And I think, what they all had in common was founded on this idea of co-creation. So again, it's enabling partners and others to be able to use easy to use tools to kind of paint these things in the world. And they always, as I mentioned, kind of were very place centric, and wanted to ground things with the places that you went through. So kind of what happened, why weren't they economically sustainable, and why aren't I now sitting in a beach in Barbados rather than still plugging away at this vision I had we had way back when? And I think it's for a range of reasons. First, really because a recognition that the emerging app world, as it was when we started App Furnace, is an app design itself is a very highly skilled activity and set of things, and it's not one skill. So it's not just the kind of artistic creative vision. There's a lot of stuff. It's very like a classic kind of iceberg. The resulting app, of course, with a beautifully designed simple interface is the tip of that. There's a lot that goes on underneath that people ideally don't see because the interface has been designed well, but is fundamental to making it happen. And so it was really hard to have a kind of easy drag and drop thing that didn't address all the plumbing or the thinking or the systemic thinking and the multiple platforms that's needed to kind of really make things go. The other thing, of course, is the app ecosystem, and the Apple Store and the Android Store is not like the web, which is started with the premises of much more kind of, it's open and addressable for all with certain standards and protocols. So, these are controlled platforms, and you have to conform with what they want, and of course they want high-end apps that are perfectly designed, that do something that a simple website couldn't do or a simple app couldn't do. So the idea of just a really simple little noddy app that lots of people put out there doesn't really work. So I think that was another thing. And again, of course, the technology landscape changes. The things, again, that used to be hard are becoming increasingly available and modular. So I think it's often a case of wondering how to then either keep up or recognize or adapt to that if you wanted to try a co-creation thing. So that again upskilled what was needed. The fact that we liked location-based experiences, and that's what it was particularly good at. The runaway hits, if you like, in terms of economic success for apps is always those which can scale massively, where you've got the hundreds and thousands of things and the kind of social media effects. And that's easy to do when you can use the kind of global reach. But by definition, a place is going to be limited by the number of people who visit it even in really high footfall places, like we worked with Historic Palaces at the Tower of London, which was always the highest hit rate in terms of downloads and interest. But even that, compared to the kind of multi-million that you can get with some of the social media platforms, don't stack up. So again, people weren't used to kind of understanding the value in the kind of experience of smaller numbers, high value, and be willing to pay for it. The other thing is that many of these initiatives and the people that we're co-creating with would typically be able to do these things through grant funding, and that then by itself kind of, once the money's run out, then the app, there's no more money to maintain it and keep it live and refresh it, which again is what's needed. So I think those are some of the factors that kind of meant that App Furnace in particular its model didn't quite work in terms of being economically sustainable. You know, it was a big hit with schools and so forth, but it just wouldn't have that that thing. But despite all of that, we're at it again. So we've actually still stuck to it and tried to learn, particularly myself, from that journey, and understood that actually part of it, that part of that is that the world has changed and now newer things are there, and newer systems are around. And rather than try to, again, have and concentrate on tools for the end artist creating it, we've really concentrated on kind of just place management. I think the other thing that's changed is, like in the early days, this was all new and sexy. This is not new and sexy anymore. Basic things everybody's got now, everybody's experienced. There's a zillion different exciting things out there. Well, that was exciting back in the day, which are now should be kind of much more well-defined, easy and accessible to all. And so now it's much more time to think about a model whereby the platform does more than concentrate just on, say, trails or walks or stories or exciting things done by artists, but that actually the platform encompasses general place management to try to make sure that you've both got the feedback loops, the ease of creation, and live updates and sustainability for a range of different services. Rather than just a single app for a single small thing. So that's why now I think with this latest release of the Place Experience platform, I'm interested in thinking about what the principles of the circular economy might also do for kind of still making this new thinking about how the Place Experience platform needs to be more about general place management might work. So just flipping now to introducing the circular economy. And again, most of the findings here, you know, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has a wonderful source of resources for anybody who really wants to find out more if they haven't already known about it. And there, you know, they've distilled it down to being a circular economy based on the principles of designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. And I'll go on to kind of dig into each of those and how they might apply. But I think that, the basic tenet is that they argue that the Industrial Revolution and our current ways of thinking were all kind of driven by a linear model, which was about rapidly kind of taking what's there, using it up, and then disposing it. And they call it the take, make, waste linear cycle. And of course, it's kind of served a lot of people very well, but the recognition now, of course, is that it's just not sustainable for the environment or anything else. And so they're saying that what's needed is a shift to this circular economy, more naturalistic thinking, whereby rather than having that philosophy of take, make, waste, you always think about anything that is created that follows more the natural cycle. So there, when a tree dies or leaves die, it goes into the ground, the nutrients are reused. So any waste from one system is food for another. And it's a more circular system that kind of regenerates for all. And so has a few disciplines in it. Quite advanced in kind of thinking about it in the kind of technical ecosystem and industrial ecosystem. So there's many companies who are already adopting this and trying to kind of design things in a circular way so that they're more modular, so that you can move more towards a kind of service-based economy rather than own something. You might just rent it out and then companies come back and reuse it, and everything is designed and developed in that circular way. And there are many kind of companies already kind of paving the way, and I'll highlight a few of them as we go through. But what I wanted to do is kind of try to pin that back into okay, so what do those concepts mean to where we are with kind of thinking about this digital placemaking platform and what it enables. So if we go back to thinking about what we've currently got in our placemaking platform, I think again, where Calvium have kind of, really kind of paid more attention is in the left-hand side of the slide. The person sitting at their laptop, they're almost like, they're the place managers, the content producers, the people kind of feeding out to this. And then you could imagine then that whilst at the moment we have, an easy thing that can go into something that then is the app that everybody else can consume. And it's easy to see that those people could then have a feedback loop back again. So that that's one little mini kind of circular economy. But actually, if you then thought about that as actually, I'm going to use the concept of a golden thread as a kind of way of tying this together through from a city-wide concept. I've got the idea, that might then represent a kind of set of agreed policies, agreements, and payments akin to the kind of private ecosystems, like Apple with their stores and everything else that everybody has to subscribe to, or Uber in the private world, but for the kind of citywide governance and enabling, so that everyone can kind of share. So if you think of that kind of as one little node in a kind of wider golden thread, then actually scaled out to the city, you could imagine all kinds of different services and interactions and handshakes between which enable all of these different things. And I'll pull out a few as we go through. So again, this idea of a citywide co-creation platform where you could have accessible wayfinding, can have community sharing and support services. It plays into event visualization and aggregation. You could have lighting services, repurposing retail spaces, ways of easily finding repair and maintenance, and enabling those services, addressing kind of health and fitness. So, and each of those kind of behave like those two other bubbles, but in a wider context. Yeah, so digging back in to try and explain that a little bit more coherently. If we take the first principle and apply it to this golden thread notion, first principle that they talk about is designing out waste and pollution. So what might those mean? What are they? Well, they're the kind of thinking about digital assets then, rather than as things that you don't want to waste. So, for example, here, as in the example before we've already got, the place manager might want to put out a message which would be formed as a digital asset. It could just be text, it could be text and images or something else, but can push that out onto the thread. Let's take the example of the Harbour Festival. So, if the Harbour Festival's come to town and now Perrose Bridge is being closed to pedestrians, a message might go out with attendant things to say that Perrose Bridge is closed. So therefore, anybody who's got an app for the wayfinding service will get an update to reroute them. The event manager can then acknowledge that and probably then understand and make sure that feeds into how they're scheduling and managing the event. You could think of citywide people who are providing lighting services who would also be notified that, again, perhaps different lighting effects might come on triggered by that, and so forth. And again, the other idea about kind of reuse and this platform is that these apps, if you like, that people actually are using don't have to be tied into one of these things. Any of these applications and services could be delivered on a range of different platforms across web, iOS or Android. So again, that kind of idea that these are cut across, if you like, to avoid waste and having to too much reuse for any one platform. So the third part of this kind of trying to not think about applying that principle to kind of this digital platform could be in, again, thinking about not wasting the ability for as many people as possible to buy into the platform. So again, as I mentioned when we did Navster, I think these ideas of making sure that we have agreements about inclusive design and accessibility as part of the ethos, so that as many different people as possible can still all share and collaborate in this. The other principle in the circular economy that was mentioned in that overview is that of keeping products and materials in use. So again, if we dig a little bit about this, here it's more about keeping digital assets and tools up to date. We know about tech obsolescence, so can we apply design principles that minimizes that, or at least says when the latest new hot thing comes along, how can we preserve and reuse things from the previous incarnation, so that it's not just let's all pay for that to be done again. How would that design thinking apply to the principles? We could have kind of canonical forms of things that all of these media assets have to adhere to, and at least that then would allow this kind of more interoperability and reduced obsolescence. And here, just pulling out kind of other examples there, stories can be thought of as reusable assets that grow and get reused. So again, at the moment, we do support this idea of trails and walking through and listening to stories, but with a feedback loop, and this idea that if we then think about those as kind of actual elements and assets, having triggered by going to the Bristol Harbour Festival and hearing stories of past and what other people have done in Bristol, the ease with which you could then contribute your own story into the pool of knowledge, so that then you get a kind of automatic layering of historical knowledge in Bristol in time and place and space as well, is another way of thinking about reusing and catalysing and building upon other people's waste, if you like. Lighting, heating and infrastructure as a service, there's some interesting things. Phillips and Rao Architects, as one of the examples cited, they created a pay-per-lux scheme. So instead of everyone buying their own bulbs and light fittings, the architects for a building only pay for light as a service, and then Philips will take responsibility for the maintenance and the physical fixtures. So again, it's moving away from everyone having to own something and think about more of an economic model where people service other people and then take old obsolete things away, recycle, maintain them, but put in the newer one, so that it kind of works for everyone. And then an easy kind of thing that I know Bristol already really does well in terms of a sharing community and the sharing economy is how to kind of fix up, repair and maintain things and share them, so that again, this idea that anybody's waste can be either disposed of or reused or put into something else. And again, the digital thread could just enable those things and visibility to others much easier. The final principle in the kind of circular economy that I'll go through is about regenerating natural systems. And there, in my thinking experiment, how does this apply to the golden thread? And again, something that Bristol is already on the forefront for, and many cities is tapping in to kind of people's own desire as community sharing and citizen reporting to do good. The aiming to do good, pay it forward, all of those things. So in terms of citizen reporting, there's some obviously some hits like the Fix My Street, where everybody can then report things, train line, and use people to be able to report loading on carriages, so that then helps everybody else to know where the less used carriages are. We collaborated, as an example, with City ID and Bristol Council, again from part of the Placemaking Media Studio projects on PopMap, which again had some of these concepts where you can test the benefits of an architecture where the events and things and presentation could be curated for and by the people of Bristol, rather than relying on other kind of global services such as Google, so that it could give a distinctly Bristol voice and tone and look. And here, an example of a different presentation still works within the digital thread, because it doesn't mean everybody has to conform to just one output. There could be a host of services and apps that all play into the management of this thread. For ourselves, we also, responded. Actually, it was a request I heard through the studio network, that in the early days of the pandemic, when everybody was kind of desperate to get the right PPE, they said, well, it's crying out for a platform to kind of help mediate people. So we quickly kind of did that to help community sharing. But I think one of the things we found is that actually, whilst it's relatively easy to do that, and there are lots of other kind of community sharing platforms, the critical thing for this is about actual compliance and regulation as a necessity. So whilst it's great that everybody could do it, I mean, especially for the health service and everything else, you want to know that everything is of a certain standard and everything is of a certain form and so forth. So again, I think part of the platform idea says that this is not just about whizzy technologies that can do things. It's also thinking and joining in the governments and policies and the rules to enable that much easier as well. And I think a really very good example with a kind of within the NHS, if you like, ecosystem, the SAM apps that are out there at the moment, where people can help each other by responding at the moment. If people are lonely, if you've got time, you can, the SAM app will help mediate fixing up people that you can chat to. But the process itself for signing up is quite, as you say, reassuringly robust, in that not everyone can just sign up, because then vulnerable people could be exposed to the wrong people and so forth. So whilst kind of free-spirited community sharing is of course a good thing, it has to be done within the governance of good regulation and good moderation, if you like, which again, part of the ethos of this golden thread means within a city that could be managed and run by the council and responsible people in a kind of framework policy agreement to ensure those standards. Mentioned again, another example that's easy is, as you can imagine, the platform that you could repurpose surplus retail space, make it easier to kind of book unused space, to pull together different things, by either walking by and easily booking it, or making public spaces more easy to book for people. So that's a quick march through just some ideas. In summary, I think I've kind of run through and shown you the kind of platforms that we've created and where we are with our place experience platform, and our desire to think about how it might expand wider, and whether it could be the basis for some larger thing, which again, I've painted a kind of vision for Bristol as being this kind of, that we could pull together and have this golden thread city, where we could more easily weave together these different communities of practice based on these circular and economy ideas. So that was it. And then again, when we get to the discussion, it'd be good to just hear your thoughts on that. As I say, whether there are, and of course, this is not totally new. A lot of people have been doing this, and I'm sure I'll hear from other people say, well, we've already done it, or perhaps it already exists in Bristol, I just don't know about it. But there have been kind of some, here's a few examples that are again evident of these kind of successful city type of things. So City Mapper, of course, is a very, very popular app that, and there it's kind of based on this social contract of trust with the provider, that, you tell them where you are, in return, they'll help you navigate the city and get through it. City was a kind of Nesta initiative that looked at kind of city as a platform. Fat Llama is I think quite interesting in terms of a way of sharing things. There's some initiatives in Santa Media, the smart maps, that again help enable people to share resources and be aware of another. And again, the Ellen MacArthur site, has a special kind of topics, and there was a whole project with Arup around circular economy in cities that I was aware of. The graphic there was just like a bunch of other city-owned platforms that were in a book called The Circular Economy and Wealth of Flows by Ken Webster. So there are lots of other examples out there and initiatives and so forth. So it's not like this movement isn't happening. I think this was just some suggestions about what it might take to kind of just continue that journey, and on a basis that has a new economic footing, really, through some sort of framework or things that plays more into the circular economy rather than the classic, how do we make as much money and get out of here quick. So I think, hope that made a little bit of sense. I probably rambled at parts and everything else, but thank you for your attention, and I'll go back to Martin to see whether there's any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Jo. That was great. There are a lot of very nice comments, and no questions as yet. Although, Missy Barrett asked, Calvium, can you all come to Miami? I suspect the answer is no.
Not right at this moment, but hey, as soon as I could.
I think very few of us are going anywhere at the moment. But yeah, lots of great comments. Go Jo, go Calvium. Love how storytelling is part of this, taking all voices into account. Everyone very excited. But yeah, everyone, please do get your questions in. But I'm going to kick things off with one question for you, Jo. So how do you feel like existing institutions, and I guess I'm particularly thinking in the cultural sphere here, how do they fit into your plan for this?
Yeah. Well, hopefully, again, I think it in the spirit of it, it would be a win-win, because I think, for example, we've just done all of the digital exhibits in We the Curious, which was fabulous, and let's hope that they can open soon and everybody could actually enjoy them. But again, I think each institution will have its own set of IT infrastructures and things that they already do. And it's just a matter of then saying, well, in this framework agreement, how might you utilize it? What's your what can you offer, and what would you be interested in terms of if this other ecosystem was there, and not replacing or having to kind of obfuscate all of the things within any institution, but again, try to kind of find these reusable assets, which then meant, oh gosh, if, say, We the Curious wanted to be aware of or send out messages to certain groups of people or tie up with an event, that could be done a little bit more real time, a little bit more easily and spontaneously. So I think that they'd probably be on the front foot and the most eager to try out some of these things, because there's already such a great camaraderie around the cultural sector about trying to help one another, especially in times like this.
Thanks. So we have our first question. Missy Barrett again asks, Jo, can you please speak a little more to the loneliness connection, and how does that work, and can you give some examples?
Yeah. Well, especially now. So I think, again, I mentioned the NHS SAM app, which I know my daughter's currently kind of signed up on it as a volunteer. So it really impressed me that was available as one acknowledgement of the problems nowadays with so many people forced into lockdown, making isolation and loneliness even worse, and I think all of these digital initiatives that are trying to reach out and help, have a big part to play there. So I think, again, this cooperative nature of encouragement and being able to offer support, be it services such as I've heard of some really great initiatives, I think, already in the UK where people might offer to kind of help pick up prescriptions or help drop off things or just check in for a chat. So I think all of those things are all great, spontaneous human initiatives that are going on that I think just need to, either organically grow, or with something like this could be just made more transparent and available to wider people. I think these blueprint case studies are very useful for that.
Thank you very much. So something we've seen a lot of with recently is that their online platforms tend to sort of accumulate power, and particularly we see it with social media, but more broadly with Google and so on. These platforms tend to centralize the power in themselves. How do you hope to prevent that happening with what you're doing, or do you?
Well, I think hopefully that's where I was hoping that the principles in the circular economy might help, because again, it's a bit like a scaling out of, and I know the ethos of the Pervasive Media Studio is very much like this. It's a kind of, if we help one another, everyone wins in that kind of principle. So, and recognize that sometimes you might be competing with somebody and sometimes you might be collaborating, and everybody needs to kind of earn rather than it being totally a kind of finance-free zone. So I do believe that there are kind of examples from those vertical monopolistic types of platforms that could be applied to something the scale of a city, and the obvious thing is we've already got the governance contract there with the councils. So again, you could, as long as there's some combination of either payment through taxes, because that's part of your council tax. So if the council tax enabled a basic policy, then within that kind of contained framework and policies, if people want to be a part of it in terms of being a service provider, or then that's the payment mechanisms for that should be within that whole system, so that what people pay for what benefit is kind of established at that level. So I guess that's why I'm exploring this. I certainly don't have the answers. We could certainly build the technology, but I think it's all those kind of framework policies and regulation and governance rules that needs a broader thing. And I do think Bristol is exceptionally placed because they're already thinking that way, and many other cities are. So it's just the speed at which we could do that in a robust, agile and light and workable way, rather than push it out to kind of some long-winded standards body committee type of thing. So I don't know.
All right, thank you very much. A question from Chloe Minek, which is more of a business-focused question. How do you balance commercial clients with large budgets versus the more creative and tend to be smaller projects?
Yeah, well, again, if I go back to my personal wish, it's always been the wish that Calvium could work with, support the people from the creative industries, because that's where our passion, our love is. The blunt reality is often it's just not, it doesn't match. So yeah, I run a business. I want to grow that business, so I need to get enough to pay my staff the right wages. So it is a conundrum. I think I personally run a kind of principle of having a balanced portfolio of projects, so that I will try to say, maybe in a year we might have some proportion of goodwill projects, some proportion of research projects, which we wouldn't expect to get the kind of profit margins that we might expect from a more robust kind of commercial project, where the client again, is used to paying the kind of IT rates which fit. so I don't think it's easy, but that's what we try to do. And it has sadly become increasingly hard to continue to work with more and more arts organizations, just because the grant funding model doesn't quite fit. It's always hard to kind of make sure that they get the quality of the kind of activity that they need, whilst the kind of tight ship you have to run as a kind of disciplined economic company. So it's quite difficult, but so far we keep trying.
Well, I think you've been successful so far. Question from MD Walker, possibly slightly blunt. What's the implication for privacy?
Oh, very good question. I mean, again, it should have been called out earlier. You know, I think privacy, ethics, is all has to be part of the framework and the policies. So I'm very keen, and what I like about the principles of the circular economy is that they aren't based on the classic social platform thing where, you know, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. You know, it's like that. Not necessarily basing the economy on the use of people's data. That more it's an assumption about the value of a service and somebody's paying for it, rather than actually having to use and coerce people's data for other purposes. So yeah, I mean, at the level we're at with the location-based things we have, we never have an architecture whereby we know who is where. We apart from the fact that somebody is there, we don't know who they are or what they do. So in that respect, the way that we track location analytics is very at a broad brush level, and we always are mindful of that whenever we work with a client in terms of doing that. So I don't believe necessarily that anything that that the current ethos and principles of things like GDPR and privacy policies and rights should be anything but also push through into this kind of world. So I think that's where, again, the idea of making this larger and as a framework is as much about those agreements and signing up to the framework agreement about the use of data and what you expose and how you expose it, as much as the technology. And I'm hoping that those kind of things would be the way that things like privacy and are preserved.
So Hilary Kalinsky asks, do you see a role for community/cooperative/citizen ownership of these digital platforms?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, well, she goes on to say this might help to secure good governance and data privacy in the interests of citizens.
I think so, and again, I'm sure people have looked longer. I've worked longer and harder than I have thus far into looking at those. But I again, as part of thinking about this, becoming aware of the number of different kind of community cooperative initiatives and platforms that have been going on are very inspiring. And I believe we're just at a stage where many people are trying different things. So I'm not confident enough to say there's an answer, but it feels like a good thing to try in the spirit of this. So again, how it's labelled and what it's called, I'm not sure, but I think the general spirit of that need to change the way that we work to support one another seems like a good thing.
And Ellie Leigh Morgan asks, How did the Place Experience and Hidden Cities app come to fruition, and what is the collaboration process involved for apps that involve communities across the globe?
Yeah, so again, the Hidden Cities and collaboration with Exeter University all started a long way back. And Professor Fabrizio Lavola, who we've partnered with, who has also been resident at the studio there. When we originally did the Hidden Florence app, I think that was first built on our old App Furnace platform that we talked of. So it went right back to those days. And if you like, he was very keen to learn from us what we'd learned from our earlier explorations on experience design and getting this right. And I think we were both interested in the process by which academics and art historians could think about a new way of publishing their knowledge so that it worked both for academics and for visitors to towns and cities. So really, it's not been an easy path, but hats off to Fabrizio for doggedly applying for serial grants to kind of build up from the first thing we produced together to now kind of building up and getting different pots of grant funding to build it. And what's been nice about the fact that he has managed to get serial grants is that has allowed us to kind of add and deepen and build upon what we knew worked rather than always starting again. And what was nice about the latest collaboration and Hidden Cities was that the kind of blueprint, which was Hidden Florence, was then rolled out to 5 other universities so that they could take that learning. And we have now encapsulated that so that our Place Experience platform supports things like that, so that there are kind of blueprint template models that people could follow that they could then use, which is a lot easier, so that people like historians can do what they do best, which is focus on the storytelling and the creation of the media assets, and Calvium can create the design output, if you like, the app in a well-trusted, inclusively designed form that we know works. And again, it's about then making it easier for them to update that. So actually, as part of our platform, the academics and Fabrizio, I think he's doing his first workshop today. You know, the apps are both out there, so they're publicly available. But for teaching purposes, he has a software license to use this platform to show his students how to create in this form and push it out into the app. So again, I think that's an interesting development that I hope will continue. Sorry, I think I rambled off a bit there.
No, that was good. So possibly our last question. We might have time for one more. I think this is someone logged in on a work account, but Somerset Film asks, Joe, you made an interesting point about scale and you gave some great examples in cities. Are there any that you might be able to give in use in rural areas?
Yeah. Well, actually, no, because I didn't research that for this talk because I was focusing on cities. So I haven't got one on the top of my head. However, I do think what rural communities are fabulous at is actually doing that in a micro way. So actually, I see rural communities as almost in my talk. I look at that kind of as one node, and then it's just like building up and building up. So they could either be a node in a larger thing or a service, or actually just run the same concept, just a rural. So I think the interesting thing is kind of what's the right bounding for something that might be able to quickly develop these framework agreements and policies so that everybody kind of shares. So I think with a rural community, it might be that the thread would kind of be an outer ring from a city, so that each of the rural communities might have centres of excellence, but they connect with other rural communities to kind of provide the same things. Cities have that more mass. And so again, any of the services that I project there might all be available, and that might be one. But I don't have off the top of my head a good example, but if anybody else out there does, then I'd be interested.
Great. So I think we've just got 1 or 2 minutes left. I've got one last question. So you've seen a lot of the stuff that you were playing around with, experimenting with 15 or 20 years ago has now become like absolutely ubiquitous. Is there anything from then that you expected to become popular that hasn't?
Well, I have been increasingly surprised that the core thing, if you like, that we're still struggling to do, which is kind of community-based storytelling and the ease at which that has not had a runaway success. So I'm aware of people who've tried it, or that the other thing that I'm surprised at is that none of the big players have really cracked indoor location. So I think those two things are a bit surprising, because for many of the research projects, going back when, you always assumed that, oh, we better hurry up on this because it'll be obsolete soon, or this way of doing things, but so I think those are the two things really. I think surprised that that there isn't that step of breakthrough with indoor location systems. It's all very still quite messy and quite difficult, and a range of different technologies. So hasn't benefited from the same advantages of the fact that you've got satellites in the sky and GPS is there for everyone. So I think that was one. And the other, that just the basics hasn't been kind of, there isn't one person who's kind of runaway success and kind of owned that area. I mean, the biggest ones, the biggest kind of runaway success in terms of establishing location aware things, of course, is Pokemon Go and Niantic. They've really done it. However, that's more in the kind of a games vertical. So I think for these kind of more ethos of community-led, joined, location aware successes, so maybe there's still time for us.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you very much, Jo. This has been wonderful to have you on.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks for helping.
So before we go, next week's talk is by Rob Eagle, and it's called Making Through Failing. Rob is an interdisciplinary artist and PhD researcher at UWE Bristol's Digital Cultures Research Centre. He'll be talking about how failure can open up opportunities for us to live non-normative lifestyles and to create work that is true to who we are and how we see the world. You can get news on all of our future talks by following us on @PMStudio UK on Twitter, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or subscribing to the newsletter on our website. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share the link. Captioned version of the video will be available to watch again shortly after we finish up. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you again here next week.